Well, I kind of feel like today we can talk about neutral tones a little bit. Today's sort of wishy-washy. Kind of cool, huh? Let's go put it somewhere really quick. And I know yesterday I talked about how you can sort of, connect extreme opposites. And I mean, this is real stuff. Everything in life is connected through, at least thermodynamics, right? If you don't think anything is connected in any other ways, whether it be instant or whatever, through rates of expansion and whatnot, or by the speed at which things can travel, limited by the speed of light. But I think today I can sort of talk about neutral opposites, how even on a curve, it's like talking about an opposite is kind of pointless a little bit, right? Because it's like saying that a true curve has a top and a bottom sort of thing. But if it's like a true circle, it sort of just goes around everywhere, right? But I think that you can sort of refine the circle. And I think maybe the more refined it is, maybe it sort of becomes these neutral ideas that probably have some interplay with each other from what seems to be very minute differences and opposite ends. And then I think all this stuff is applicable in life, you know what I mean? Just as yesterday I spoke about how when dealing with circumstances, you can keep yourself from falling too far in love or becoming too out of control with hate, kind of thing. And I stopped on this page today where it says, "My heart tends to live in the wrong place at the right time, but I've always loved the sound of rain on a sunny day and the moon after sunrise." Which, is a very poetic way that I think says very similar things to what I'm saying. And it's really sad to me that it's like maybe somebody can say something like that, but they're not taken seriously at the same time. And it's just seen as gibberish or whatever. But, I've said a couple times these past few days that to a couple people in my daily life, some people in person, some people through online relationships or whatever, but the idea that beautiful things are pretty dangerous, because there's not many things out there that can hurt you like beautiful things can. I feel like maybe a lot of other things can leave scratches and stuff like that, but I think beautiful things can leave pretty deep internal wounds, because we think that we see something that's true because of its angular maxims that sort of reach these pinnacles of evolution, which I just think is, that idea of opposites becoming interchangeable and intertwined with their opposite. If I had to actually give a definition that I think is fitting for evolution at this moment, disregard any other form of the word that you've ever heard at this moment, but I'm going to use it to describe the relationship between the idea of curves and points on curves in different angles, and their relationships in the network between, an organism and all of its angles. And I kind of wanted to touch on much more subtle notes today if I could, right? I don't know if anything's gonna really come to me or not, but that was at least my plan when I hit the record button. Usually I can sort of figure things out, exactly what I need to do. But maybe here's something that I've actually tried to engage in today, you know what I mean? It's the idea of asking. And I feel like asking is one of those things that takes into a lot of consideration your attitude. Because at some point in time, not asking something is what you want to do. You don't want to ask, because doing it your way and without things having to tell you how to do something, or giving you something to help you in the process, is part of a greater process, versus when you realize that not asking is just never going to get you what asking possibly could. And I feel like the emotions involved in just asking, because I can easily see those two sides to such a thing. One, where it's like the task is very simple, kind of, it's like a simple thing, but it's like not working, so you don't want to ask because you can do it, right? And it almost has very little to do with a lot of other emotions involved, with a lot of other processes, but that other side being that you just almost see no other way to get you to a certain place unless you ask for something that you don't have. And I had a very interesting thought about that. I thought, well, what if I ask and maybe it's not that they can't provide me with what I'm asking, but maybe I'm wrong in thinking that that's the thing to ask for. Maybe that's not necessarily the right thing to ask for. And so maybe all things can be acclaimed by asking. And same goes on the other side, where I'm talking about not wanting to ask because it's something that you feel like you can do on your own. But again, how do you know that that's the right thing to do to get you to that same place? Let's say we're trying to get to the same place even. It's a very hairline, type of distance between us feeling like we need to ask versus us actually knowing that we really could. And maybe there's questions within both sides. And so how do we find the political point between those two situations, those two scenarios, where perhaps maybe we're asking for the wrong thing, or perhaps maybe we're trying to do the wrong thing. And I feel like it is a very subtle game, because if you just start going around asking everybody, it's like, you know, life is about being able to have an intelligence, like a real intelligence about things, you know, or like realistically, your character is going to be damaged if you have to ask for everything, you know. And realistically, your character is going to be damaged if you don't ever ask for something. And I feel like there's some grace with either side, you know what I mean? It's all an affectant of your mood and how long you've been enduring either situation or scenario, up until the point of where your interests have dramatically changed or reached another state of prime or ground zero from which you can then extend from again outwardly with these actions. Maybe they play with each other, where it's not about me asking for something, it's about me doing something differently. Or it's not about doing something differently, it's about me asking for something. But if character is our prime objective here, and we're trying to use that real world intelligence, because there's always a way that seems like grit can just wear anything down. You know, if you're familiar with computer technology, there's something called a brute force attack, which they say every system is susceptible to a brute force attack. It just means that a system just guesses until it eventually gets something right, and then proceeds with that, you know. It's brute force. Now, of course, there's many other types of weird ways to gain access to different places. Maybe a lot of them involve asking the right thing, which perhaps allows you to bypass, you know, maybe something else. But if character is our greatest sort of thing here, and we want a character that understands that everything can be worn down with brute force, does that necessarily mean that just going forward with something and achieving what we want even in the most ridiculous manner possible, just so that we can say we did it, have done it? Does that actually consider ourselves, perhaps, or not? Maybe sometimes we need to ask ourselves, And how does one realistically do that? I think it's by taking time like this. This isn't so unrealistic. To try and think through situations and scenarios in a way, whether it's writing or drawing or speaking, to allow yourself that time to think. Give yourself some space. Because there's almost nothing more soothing than your voice. I think, and if you can somehow conjure up the fact that you're working on something in the most minute way possible, and that's with the word, then perhaps you can allow yourself some of that space, and then maybe you can be afforded some time to ask some more important questions. And continually discover things about yourself. And maybe that's kind of where there's like a very fine point. It's not so much like an aha kind of thing. I mean, it still is almost, but maybe that's just the appearance of a curve or a point on a curve, or us actually even noticing a curve. Maybe that's as fine as you can get in terms of there being a point on a continuous line, is actually even noticing it in the first place. There will always be a first place of noticing it. But that idea where I just came to that, maybe by doing this, you can ask more questions. And then it's a character building experience, and one where you can practice these things. You can practice the art of this. And then you don't have to practice on other people, where other people, and people in general, maybe there are some more forgiving than others, but people are things that tend to remember. And if you really want to try and decipher the best way possible to move forward in your life, then maybe questioning yourself is ultimately one of the best ways to do that. And so maybe just sort of brute forcing your way out there, but not necessarily brute forcing your way into anything, but the one thing that you feel like you can stand the criticism of, which is hopefully your own criticism. So it's sort of like brute forcing your way into yourself, which means that you at that moment, you really have no one to blame for yourself. Earlier this morning, I was talking about why winter, and that's kind of one thing I'm talking about more than anything, is sort of what am I going to do for winter? And it's just, I have such a hard time moving with the group because it involves so much belief in what the group thinks. And when I've spent so much time building a character like this that is like extremely independent in its own way, I just feel sort of like losing that, getting to a place where as soon as I adhere to the emotions of a lot of other people, I'm in a place that's susceptible to whatever those changes are in other people's lives. And it just feels very risky to me and very very dangerous. You know what I mean? Kind of talk about like an old person falling, you know what I mean? Yeah, further to fall kind of thing or whatever, right? Much more personality to lose when groupthink is, like the only thing you can choose. Well, anyways, I've reached out to a company and tried to see if, maybe I do have a little bit of pull here in terms of what I can sort of summon and provide for people near me and far away from me. So, and then maybe I can sort of, you know, use these attributes that I've sort of accrued to help manifest these ideas that I'm expressing. But anyways, guys, I know my phone's almost dead here, so who knows, maybe it's already dead and I've stopped recording. But anyways, that's it for today, guys, and I'll see you on the next one.